What is up, guys? It is your girl Mindy, the Karmic DF from TikTok, and today we're going to talk about why we get so triggered, what we can do, what steps to take in order to use these triggers as an advantage to heal ourselves, to move forward, to begin to understand other people. So if you're someone that, is easily hurt, maybe you're a sensitive, an empath, etc., and you've had trouble figuring out, why am I reacting this way? Why am I so overwhelmed by this situation? Then we're going to go over what triggers really are for, what we can do in order to change our perspective about triggers, and then how to genuinely heal from it so that we can move forward, understand why we behave the way we do, why other people trigger us, and finally be able to heal that. So if this is something you're into, please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that notification button for more videos in the future. And as always, let's get into it. So believe it or not, and this is how you have to change your mindset, but believe it or not, people that trigger you are your best resources for figuring out what it is that you still need to heal within yourself. Because what's going on when you are getting triggered is there are two perspectives. So you're fighting with, say, you're in a relationship and you're having an argument. You have to ask yourself, what in me is being triggered right now, and what in them is also being triggered for them to react the way that they're reacting. So when you're having an argument with anyone, you have to ask yourself, what in me is not healed that's coming up to the surface, while at the same time, what am I triggering in them that is bringing up that response? And if you can pull your emotions away, which I know is going to be hard, so, use whatever you have as a resource in order to, avoid conflict, whether it's walking away from the situation, taking a breather, whatever it needs to be for you. But in reality, you attract what you know, and people are a reflection of yourself and your unhealed wounds. So if you notice, like, for instance, if you had neglectful parents, or, you had a childhood where you weren't heard and your emotions weren't validated, and so now as an adult, you lash out because you think that in order to be heard, you have to get angry, you have to get loud, because it's the only way that you'll get attention. Now, what I'm being drawn to as I'm talking about this, because it's so common, is the dynamic between anxious attachment people and avoidant attachment. And you can learn a lot from these relationships, because it really goes hand in hand in terms of, like, say you're anxious attachment, and so you constantly need that reassurance because you didn't get it as a child, right? And then you meet somebody who is avoidant attachment, that again, same kind of similar childhood wounds, 111 on the clock as I'm saying this, same kind of childhood wounds, but they've gone into a hyper independence. And so you need that reassurance in order to feel validated, and that person is overwhelmed by emotions as a whole, they shut down. So when you can look at these arguments as, what am I being taught about myself and about that person, that's when you can kind of disconnect the emotions involved in that argument and in future arguments. Because if you can ask yourself that question, then you're opening the door to what it is that you need to learn at this moment in time. And so we often think that we let our ego take over, basically, where we're like, I don't deserve this, and that's fair, we don't, right? But at the same time, we have to go, okay, what can this teach me about myself, about my needs? And so maybe, you have learned because of anxious attachment to constantly need validation, and then you draw in someone who has avoidant attachment, and that's kind of turning them off, and so they're kind of pulling away from you. They're not giving you that validation you need. This is a prime example of learning from these triggers that in reality what you need is yourself. You need your own validation. You haven't been taught to validate yourself. And unfortunately, with a lot of people, this starts in childhood, and that's why we have this anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. And so we have to go back a little bit and ask ourselves, why are we behaving this way? Why do we need this validation from other people in order to feel good within ourselves? Why are we being triggered? Well, it's because we don't know how to fill our own cup, how to honor our own emotions when we're going through something. And so we seek out other people to help us validate our own experiences, when in reality, we should be validating our own.
Maybe you're being triggered at work. You might have a boss that is disrespectful to you, and that's triggering you because, again, maybe that's something that you experienced in childhood. Maybe that's something you experience in your relationships. And so you get overwhelmed by the argument between
you and the boss. Well, in reality, if you look at it from a higher perspective, that boss is overwhelmed, and so they're lashing out at you because they're overwhelmed, while at the same time you're kind of like, I don't want to say punching bag because that's kind of, but it is the truth, like people will seek out people that are kind to kind of dump on. And so this is a great opportunity to learn about your boundaries and how you, up until this moment, have not necessarily honored your needs, honored your feelings, and you lacked that respect for yourself because you were never taught to respect yourself. And so you let people walk all over you, and then you're wondering like, what's wrong with me? Why does no one appreciate me? But in reality, it's you need to appreciate yourself first so that you can be the model of what it is that you expect others to give for you. I'm getting a really strong blocked throat chakra, so I think I'm speaking to people that have a hard time really talking about their needs because I'm really being drawn to the throat chakra here. But we have a sick society that's been pushed for so long, that's in the more masculine side of go, 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 ignore your feelings, stop being sensitive, and that's not healthy at all. And so we've learned to remove our emotions and to be tough and to be strong. But to quote, I believe Brene Brown says, there is no strength without a vulnerability. There is no being strong within yourself unless you're vulnerable, because taking chances, for instance, that's being vulnerable, right? You have to believe in yourself enough to take a leap. And so we often associate vulnerability and sensitivity with negative things, and that's not the truth at all. But we do need to realize how to regulate our emotions and where they're coming from. So every trigger is a really great opportunity for you to figure out what hasn't been healed inside of you, and so that you can kind of emotionally detach from someone who's triggering you, noticing that that is the same kind of thing being reflected back at you. So if you're being triggered and someone else is being triggered, you can go, well, what am I doing that could potentially be hitting or poking at their unhealed childhood trauma as well? Because again, people are your best chance at learning about yourself. When you are being yelled at and you retreat, and then you're really triggered by being yelled at, you can go in and ask yourself, well, why am I triggered by being yelled at? And then you may notice that when you were 8 years old, your parents fought a lot, and so you learned as a coping mechanism as a child to pull yourself away from that. And now that you're an adult, you should start to learn how to cope with people that aren't healthy. But because you didn't get taught that as a child, you were emotionally stunted as a child. You didn't get to learn how to regulate your emotions, how to be healthy as an adult, because you were stunted. You were too busy trying to figure out how to appease your parents, or, you know, if that continued in relationships, how to appease your spouse. And what we need to do is realize that these relationships and these friendships, they are all teaching us who we are and where those triggers are, in order to figure out what it is that we still need to work on to be strong within ourselves. So like the arguing, when someone goes and attacks you and you get triggered and then you run away, right? Well, we can look at it with two sets of lenses here. We can go, okay, we're being triggered by this argument because we've been yelled at in the past. And in the past, we had to protect ourselves because we weren't adults yet. We didn't know how to regulate, and so we ran away. And then we can also look at the person who's yelling at us and go, instead of thinking that this is personal, we can realize that they also don't know how to regulate their own emotions. And so instead of them retreating like you do, they lash out because they feel that that is how they are best heard. Oh my God. Do y'all have trouble talking? Because this is a hard video for me here. But this is fixable, because if you can approach this in a more like bird's eye perspective. I'm seeing like a bird and like looking down at the situation from an unbiased opinion. Then you could see how these dynamics play out. When we get triggered, it really is as simple as we are not confident within ourselves. We are not secure within ourselves. And that's why we have to shift how we think about things and realize that it's not a reflection on us necessarily. It's simply something that we need to learn about ourselves. So, how do we work through these triggers so that we are a solid version of ourselves? We take each moment as a time or an opportunity to learn about ourselves, because until we get into a solid foundation of ourselves where we feel good, where we honor ourselves, where we are our own cheerleader, our own spouse, our own parent, we need to be those people for ourselves first in order for it to reflect back out into the world, so that we get these healthier connections, these healthier relationships. It's not about blame, and it's not about thinking that we're inherently flawed. It's simply understanding what led us to these moments in which we don't feel confident and secure within ourselves. So again, with the relationship dynamic, because that one's really easy, if you have anxious attachment and avoidant attachment, you need validation because you didn't get validation from your parents. And in reality, now that you're an adult, you have to start giving that validation to yourself. I see a lot of times online where people are like, oh, you need to leave that man because he didn't text you right back right away. Well, you're being triggered. And you're being triggered because you seek that validation because you don't know how to validate yourself. And in reality, that man might just be working a really long shift and he's emotionally exhausted and he doesn't have the energy to help fill your cup. And in reality, you need to learn how to fill your own cup. So when we can disconnect ourselves from the emotions, pull ourselves aside, even journaling is really important. You can start to dissect what these triggers are really telling you about yourself and about these dynamics that you are attracting. Because if you ever notice, if you have some sort of emotionally unavailable parents, because unfortunately, that's most of society at this point. We have been running on masculine energy for a very long time, and so we've kind of neglected the emotional side, the sensitive side, the receptive, the surrendering, the being able to believe that things will work out. We've lost all of that. We're more like robotic, like go, 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 go. We've disconnected with who we are, that sensitive side of ourselves, and usually in childhood, that is to protect ourselves. But as an adult, we need to learn how to be our own parent and how to heal our own wounds instead of expecting others to do it for us. So next time you're triggered, and just to sum this up, I'll give a friend example. Say that you are starting to, believe in yourself and you're being more optimistic about things and you're trying to get healthy and you're trying to take care of yourself, and you may have a friend that doesn't know how to do that and you're starting to move up. And that's going to trigger that friend because they're going to think, oh, you're better than me, you think you're better than me, or, like they want to keep you small because they aren't ready to do that work on themselves. And so there lies, again, another type of trigger where you're clashing with friends because you're working on yourself. You're triggering wounds in them where they subconsciously believe that they can't also do the work to heal. We see this in a lot of dynamics. It plays out in relationships, in friendships, in family. But if we learn where it's coming from, that's when we can stop the cycle. That's when we can stop the pattern of behavior. We have to realize that there is a lesson to be learned in each and every trigger. When we are triggered by, I gotta bring this up because I want to. When we're triggered by comics, for instance, comedy is supposed to be fun and it picks at things that are really, and unfortunately we live in a time where we're even canceling comedians because we genuinely don't know how to regulate our emotions and we don't know how to heal from prior trauma. But unfortunately, it's not up to the rest of the world to deal with your triggers. You have to have that confidence. You have to believe in yourself. You have to give yourself that nurturing, that kindness, and heal from it on your own. I've seen so many people that are like, I'll give a personal story. I unfortunately had a hard time in my 20s, and I didn't want to be here. And there's a lot of comedians that make jokes about, unaliving. And for a lot of people, that's really triggering, and they get really mad at those comedians. But in reality, I don't personally find that offensive because I've already healed from that. I don't see that as my identity anymore. I see that as something that I've lived through, that I've healed, that I've worked through in therapy, which is super important. And now I can also laugh at those jokes because I see that it's not poking at me, right? It's only going to trigger me if it's something that I haven't worked on. But if it's something that I can look back on and be like, that was a tough time, but I got through it, then it's going to be a lot easier for me to handle those type of jokes. We need to start taking accountability for our own emotions and stop expecting the rest of the world to adjust itself for our triggers, because in reality it's up to us to heal, and comedians aren't going to change to adapt to your emotions, and people aren't going to change to adapt to your emotions because they have their own stuff that they got to deal with. Relationships are meant to teach us. We are supposed to end up with, unless you're polyamorous, I respect it, or asexual, yeah. But with relationships, they are meant to teach us, but we're supposed to end up with one person for most of us, right? And so every person leading up to the one that we're meant to be with is teaching us little cracks within ourselves that we need to heal so that we can be solid within ourselves, so that we are confident within ourselves, so that we don't have to question ourselves, so that if you get that F boy, F girl that sends you a text and then disappears and you're like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not enough? Of course you're enough. But that person is obviously not emotionally available. They're not as evolved. We need to stop taking these things personally and start dissecting what it is that is triggering us so that we can heal from it, so that it is no longer in the way. And once you can do that, you can see the bigger picture in everybody. When you can heal yourself, when you can feel solid within yourself, you will get someone that will try to trigger you and you can genuinely laugh it off, because you are in a solid place within yourself that you'll notice that used to trigger me, but it's not going to trigger me anymore because I'm secure within myself. I've done the work. I now know why these things, these patterns keep repeating, these things keep hurting me. I understand now because I've gone within and asked myself, why does this hurt? Where is this coming from? And what work can I do to stop this cycle from repeating? So basically, to summarize everything that I've already said, if you get triggered, start to look at it as a learning experience for yourself so that you can begin to heal those things, so that you can be a vibrational match to healthier people. Because I see a lot of people that, and I've been there too, in my 20s, oh my God, I was so victim mentality. It was really bad, and I've done a lot of work in order to stop it. But we like to put the blame on everybody else instead of focusing on what really hurts. And when we can start to look at what we accept, what we believe about ourselves that is flawed, because we are all inherently worthy of good things and being treated respectfully and being loved and nurtured and cared for. But if you can't model that behavior to yourself, you are going to keep attracting people that will show you where those triggers are. I'm seeing like spirit is showing me like buttons and like being poked at. They're always going to poke you because you are meant to learn about yourself. And when you can flip the narrative in your mind from, oh, I'm being attacked, I'm not good enough, to, oh, what is this meant to teach me about myself? Why am I being triggered? What can I do moving forward so that this no longer triggers me? Then you have all of that strength within yourself to do the work, to be strong and fierce, and to no longer let people affect you and offend you in the way that you've been. We often think that we need someone to save us, or we need someone to have our back. We're constantly running to friends for advice, but we're not doing the work. We get validation from our friends like, hey, this guy treated me so bad and I'm feeling so bad. And hey, if you got to vent, right? But what work are you doing in order to make sure this doesn't happen again? If you're consistently attracting people that disrespect you, then ask yourself, do I respect myself? Am I confident within myself? Because realistically, and I had to have this conversation with myself, so I'm not speaking from like judging you, I'm speaking from my own personal. when I was constantly attracting avoidant people, it was due to the fact that I needed that constant validation, that constant reassurance in order to feel like I was good enough. And because I kept seeking someone's approval other than my own, I would always attract people that did not support me fully, that reacted and got mad if I was too sensitive, too emotional, or had feelings. But in reality, we're dealing with someone who's hyper independent, and then me who needs that constant reassurance in order to feel secure, when in reality both of us are flawed. And that's okay, because both of us had childhood wounds that we are still enacting in life because we got stunted. And you need to remember that you are not broken. You didn't have the nurturing that you needed in order to be that level of emotionally developed, so that things just kind of like fly off your, as soon as I said that, I hear Dust Your Shoulders Off, that song. But we need to realize that none of this is personal. It's really just reflections into ourselves of what still needs to be healed. And if you can change your mentality, and if you can start to go, oh, what is this telling me about myself? I need to go within so that I can learn more about what it is that I need, and start filling your own cup. Start building your own self-esteem instead of going to other people. Start realizing that you are inherently worthy. Start having solid boundaries and realizing that maybe you give too much, and that's why you're exhausted and you feel that you're unappreciated. Well, maybe the problem is kind of partly due to the fact that you don't know how to put in boundaries, because you feel the need to validate others in order to feel like you are worthy, when in reality you are worthy, period, point blank. But you have to teach yourself that in order to develop that like thick skin, because you are so solid within yourself that you don't have to worry about triggers anymore. And triggers are going to come up no matter what, but they won't be as excessive if you are solid within yourself. And that's where we need to head to as an entire species, because you see it on social media where we're all thinking that our opinions are facts and they matter, and we need to change the opinion of strangers on the internet. Who cares? Who freaking cares? If you argue with Joe Schmo in Idaho and you live in Arizona, why are we getting angry about that stuff? The only reason we get angry about that stuff is because we constantly feel the need to be validated, because we likely weren't validated to the degree we needed to be as a child or in relationships, and that stunted our emotional growth. And when you start to see it that way, and when you can pull yourself away from the emotions for a bit, journal down what's going on with you, you will start to see a pattern, and then you can break that cycle. So that's going to be the end of this video. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if it was. I can go into this more. I love this subject. I think that we have a really big issue of black and white thinking right now in this moment, where it's all or nothing. You see it in politics all the time. You see it in relationships where it's like, it's how I feel or I'm done, and we don't actually meet in the middle. There is a very obvious gray area with humans, but we kind of ignore that because we have the need to be validated, on top of having social media where we feel like our opinions are facts, and if someone disagrees it triggers us. And what is that teaching us about our childhood? Do you see how the cycles just keep repeating itself? So notice what's going on with you internally, go inward and figure out what it is that still needs to be healed. And if you can do that work and start to be solid within yourself, because you realize that you have control over your own life and you have control over your triggers, as long as you do the healing work that is necessary to realize why we behave the way that we do, then we can move forward, feel confident in ourselves, and begin to attract healthier relationships, both platonic, romantic, and even in jobs. Once you begin to respect yourself, you're going to attract people that respect you as well. But we have to do the work first. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope it was helpful. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video.